This lecture will discuss the organization, shapes, and types of attachments of muscles. All muscles are organized into units called fascicles. Each muscle usually contains many fascicles. Here we can see one muscle fascicle, highlighted in yellow. Each fascicle is basically a bundle of muscle cells. Here, one muscle cell is highlighted in red. You may also see muscle cells referred to as muscle fibers because they are so long and thin. Muscles are also surrounded by 3 layers of connective tissue. These are thin sheets of tissue that wrap around different parts of the muscle. So surrounding the outside of the entire muscle is the epimysium. Within the muscle, perimysium wraps around and surrounds every fascicle. And within each fascicle, endomysium surrounds each individual muscle cell. The arrangement of fascicles within a muscle is important because we can use that arrangement to classify muscles into different shapes. So one type of muscle shape is circular. This one is pretty self-explanatory. Fascicles are arranged in a circular shape around an opening. One example of this would be the orbicularis oris muscle, which is a muscle that wraps around our mouth and allows you to make a kissy face when you contract it. Another type of muscle is a convergent muscle. Here you have many fascicles from a broad area that all converge to one attachment, like so. An example of this, shown here, is pectoralis major, which is the large muscle on your chest. Another type of muscle shape is a parallel muscle. Here, fascicles run parallel to the long axis of the muscle. An example of this type of muscle would be sartorius, which is a long muscle in your anterior thigh. And finally, we have the pennate muscle. Here, fascicles attach at an angle to a central tendon. An example of this would be the deltoid, which is the large muscle on your shoulder. So here is one central tendon highlighted in red, and you can see that it has many short fascicles that attach to that central tendon at an angle. Note that pennate muscles can be further subdivided by how many groups of fascicles they contain. So a unipennate muscle has only one group of fascicles that all attach to a tendon at one angle. A bipennate muscle has 2 groups of fascicles that attach to a tendon at 2 different angles, and a multipennate muscle, like the deltoid, has multiple tendons and multiple groups of fascicles. Different muscle shapes are good at different things, too. So a long parallel muscle, for example, can contract quite far and significantly shorten itself. A muscle's ability to shorten is based on how long its cells are. But a multipennate muscle is stronger, meaning it can generate more force. This is because it contains a large number of short fascicles. Muscle strength is determined by the total number of muscle cells rather than their length. So a muscle like the deltoid with many short muscle cells is the strongest type of muscle. Now let's talk a bit more about how muscles function and how they attach to the skeleton. All muscles have at least 2 attachment points. The origin is where the fixed end of the muscle attaches, and the insertion is where the movable end attaches. So on the biceps brachii, for example, shown here, the more proximal attachment to the scapula is considered to be the origin, and the distal attachment to the radius is considered to be the insertion. You'll learn the attachments and actions of specific muscles in the lab portion of this course. But for the purposes of this class, we won't worry too much about which attachment point is the origin versus the insertion. The most common type of muscle attachment is called an indirect attachment. In this case, a muscle attaches to the skeleton via a tendon. A tendon occurs where the collagen fibers of the epimysium form a thick band of tissue that merges into the periosteum of a bone. Tendons are very strong, and although they connect muscles to bones, they don't contain any muscle cells, so they aren't capable of contraction and can only stretch a little bit. The biceps brachii attaches to the scapula via 2 tendons, for example, and another example would be the tendon of the gastrocnemius muscle in your ankle, also known as the Achilles tendon. Another type of attachment is the direct attachment. In this case, the muscle is directly attached to the bone without any tendon in between. The collagen fibers of the epimysium are directly continuous with the periosteum of the bone, so it looks like the muscle tissue emerges directly from the bone. Examples of this type of attachment would include the intercostal muscles, which attach between adjacent ribs and move the ribs, and the masseter muscle, which is attached to the mandible and closes the jaw. Finally, there are some muscles that do not attach directly to a bone, but instead attach to another muscle via a broad sheet of connective tissue called an aponeurosis. One example of this would be the abdominal aponeurosis. Here, the external oblique muscles, which wrap around the sides of the abdomen, are attached to each other anteriorly via an aponeurosis, essentially a very broad, thin tendon, which appears white, that connects the two muscles and does not attach to any bone.